I'm going to go ahead and start this up unless anybody knows if there's somebody that's supposed to be here right now still not on. Please let me know if there's somebody on your group that's supposed to be here and is still not on.
We're good.
Okay. All right, then we're going to go ahead and begin this meeting. This is a special meeting of the Mason County Commission for April 20th, 2021 to discuss jail needs study. It says to start with introductions first. I'm going to simplify some of this to explain. I'm Commissioner Randy Netherland. I have Commissioner Kevin Schutte and Commissioner Sharon Trask on. We have the head of support services, the director Frank Pinter on our side. I also see we have Under Sheriff Travis Adams. Under Sheriff, who do you have in your room with you?
Can you hear me?
Yep.
I've just got the sheriff here with me.
Okay, so we have the sheriff and the undersheriff both in there. Bill, who do you have in your group?
I'm Bill Valdez. I'm partner with K&B Architects. I have with me Sherry O'Brien, who's another partner here at K&B Architects, and Brian Belay, who's an associate at K&B Architects.
Okay, thank you. Is there anybody that has joined that I did not mention or that has not been mentioned? If you have, please unmute yourself and let me know you're here. Joining us now is Loretta Swanson, and I see Kevin Hansen from the Sheriff's Department. He's the chief of the jail.
Yeah, I'm here. Thanks, Commissioner.
Is there anybody else? Then hearing none, I will go ahead and turn over the discussion for the discussion items on the agenda to Bill Valdez, if you don't mind to take from here. And I'd ask that anybody in the public or anybody has questions, please wait until he puts forward his information. You'll be given an opportunity at the end to speak. I don't see anybody from the public, but I want to inform the public, if anybody is in there, that this is not for discussion with the general public. This is an educational and open discussion amongst the commission and those in the situation to do something when it comes to the jail needs and jail needs study. With that being said, Bill, please take over.
Great, thank you. I'll ask if everyone can please mute themselves while we're presenting, just so there isn't any background kind of going on there. So then I will share my screen. Okay. Where's that? A second. This has got moved over a little bit. Do this so I can actually see everybody. Okay. So thank you very much, Commissioner. This is the agenda that we have for today's presentation. What we want to be able to go through, which we've already done the introductions, but we'll walk you through just briefly the project schedule that we anticipate from this restart, and then being able to move forward. We have a couple of questions with regard to meeting dates and times and stuff like that we'd like to be able to get some feedback from, so we can finalize the scheduled dates. Then we're going to review the current space program that we had based off of our last meeting with the stakeholder groups, which was back in February 20th of 2020. And we'll walk through that. And then there was a couple of questions that were asked that they wanted, that you wanted to be able to give our feedback on with regard to the impacts of some additional legislation that's been going on, which we listed 4 of those there, including a Senate bill, the State versus Blake, and then some sentencing guidelines and juvenile designation changes, which Sherry O'Brien will be talking a little bit about some of those as well. And then we were going to have and talk a little bit about the initial site option review. I'm going to have Brian kind of bring up those sites so we can talk a little bit about those. And then we'll have kind of open it up and be able to have some conversations about open Q&A, as well as kind of next steps as we continue to move forward. So that's the agenda that we have for this afternoon. Then as far as our schedule goes, which we have indicated here, it's currently April 20th, which we're having as our kickoff meeting. As we continue forward, our next meeting that we'd like to be able to schedule is to really go in more detail and go through the program verification to make sure that there are any changes that have occurred to the program, either from today's conversations or with regard to how your facility has been operating over the last year. We can capture those and incorporate to finalize the space list and the space program. And then later in May, we want to go through those initial sites and go through some test fit options that we'd have and how, as well as the evaluation of those sites, to really see the viability of how those sites would be able to work based off of the program that's been verified. And then by June, and early in June, we would go through some concept design options. So that would be really working out how the building would be laid out in more detail. And again, based off of the sites that are being considered. By late June, we would hopefully have a preferred option with a preferred site and be able to have some preliminary cost models for how much a building would cost to be able to be developed on that existing site or on that site, as well as starting to look at the overall project costs. So as cost models go, that there would be a construction cost, which is the bricks and mortar, the cost of the building, and then project costs includes everything else that would include design services, your permits, your fees, your offsite development costs, and everything along those lines, including FF&E, your fixtures, furniture, and equipment, and any other consultants that might be hired directly by the county, as well as the county's own contingency that you would carry throughout the design and construction process. So all of that would be built into an overall project cost and a project budget that we'd work out and be presenting to you as well. So essentially, you know the total turnkey cost and value of the preferred option and the preferred project. Go ahead. Okay, I thought there was a question that was asked. Finally, come in July, we would actually then update based off of feedback that we would have gotten from our meetings in June to be able to have updated and final cost models. We'd have a draft report that would kind of compile everything that's occurred, over the last 2 years, as well as the work that we're outlining right here with regards to conceptual design, site evaluation, site test fits, cost modeling, as well as a whole lot of additional information just about level of quality of materials, systems that would be anticipated. So that is all going to be documented as kind of that snapshot in time with regard to this project. And then that would be submitted, allowing the county to review the document. We'd have a review meeting to receive any feedback or any additional clarification. And then we'd finalize the report and the document, which would be hopefully by the end of July. That's roughly the timing that we would be looking at for this. The question that I end up having, so feel free to unmute yourselves to be able to respond, is there certain days that the stakeholder group, meaning the sheriff and the jail command staff and county facilities, are more available to be able to meet? And if there are, excuse me, is there certain times of day? Is it in the mornings or in the afternoons on certain days of the week? Because we'd like to then start actually putting dates to these time frames, so then we can actually start confirming future agendas and be able to get these meetings on stakeholders' calendars. So that is the first question. Assuming that some of the meeting dates have and availability might have changed from when we had our meetings back in 2019. So, Kevin or anyone from the county.
Yeah, this is Chief Hansen. Tuesdays, Thursdays are good all day. Wednesdays after noon are good. Monday and Friday, not so much.
Okay.
I would say keep Monday and Tuesdays. This is Sharon. Keep Monday and Tuesdays clear. They're bad for the commissioners.
Okay. So it sounds like Wednesdays in the afternoon or Thursdays anytime would be the best for the stakeholders.
By 1 o'clock, if possible.
By 1 o'clock or at 1 o'clock?
By anytime.
Okay.
Commissioner Trask, were you saying that you did not think Tuesdays were a good day before lunch?
Well, you never know. Sometimes we might have a meeting that runs longer. So typically I try to keep Tuesday mornings clear.
Right. Okay. That's helpful. So we'll use this as kind of a basis. We'll work through a draft schedule. We'll follow up directly with Frank and confirm. Once that has been confirmed, then we'll send out the meeting dates just like we did previously during the population projection demographic analysis phase of the project. So we'll do that the exact same way. So that's helpful. Okay. So with regard to the projections and the space program, like I indicated, we met on February the 20th, which was our last meeting, and we met with the sheriff and jail staff to really go through what the needs were for the jail. And these were kind of the meeting minutes that we captured all that information from. Essentially, really what came out of those conversations were really what each department needs to be, how that needs to be functioned. We talked a little bit about how the existing functions, and then how there would be some changes and modifications to operations and functions, as well as really kind of targeting a bed count based off of the population projections and demographic analysis that Chin Planning completed previously. And essentially what came out of that was targeting something in the 230 to a 250 bed range, which is how our space program that I'm about to kind of walk you through was developed. And there's a series of questions that actually we kind of have that kind of came out of those conversations that we'd like some kind of interaction, some clarification on possibly. But essentially this is the draft space program that was developed. It's broken up by department. As you can see here, that within your general housing, which includes minimum security, medium security, maximum security, your segregation and protective, your male and female populations is 194 beds. With your alternative housing, which is more dormitories for your work release and inmate worker program, is an additional 46 beds for both male and female populations, which brings us to 124 total beds within the jail program, which is right in line with essentially those targets that we had talked about back in February of 2020. Based off of the space program that was developed, what you see here is a departmental square footage, a DSF. So essentially that is the actual net usable area of a space. So that would be like a office building or an office that is 10 feet by 10 feet would be 100 square feet. And then you have the circulation needed to be able to get into that office, as well as the thickness of the wall surrounding that office. would be factored into that, and that gets us our departmental square footage. Then what we have here is an additional grossing factor, and what that does is that allows and incorporates the exterior enclosure of the building, as well as additional undocumented spaces and functions. So that would be additional mechanical for mechanical chases, plumbing chases, some additional utility and other type of infrastructure, any additional structural elements that would be taking up space within the building would be all captured within that additional grossing square footage. So then on the far right-hand side that we have here would be the total building gross square footage. So that would be the total square footage of the entire building from the outside face to the outside face. One thing to keep in mind with this is this includes all the enclosed spaces within the building, as well as the outdoor rec areas that would be associated with the housing area is included in this total, which is just under 85,000 gross square feet. What is not included in that is the vehicle sally port. While it will be enclosed, not necessarily, and to be determined if it'll actually have a roof over the portion of it. The notes and the conversations that we had is that it'd be screened, essentially be enclosed with a portion of the roof overhanging to be able to allow for those transports to be actually underneath a portion that would be sheltered. But for the most part, it'd be open air. That square footage is not captured in this number, because essentially it's open air and more part of the overall site and site requirements. So then talking about site, we come down here to the site component. We have a jail footprint, which is 76,655 based off of the program. And you'll notice that footprint is different than the departmental gross square or the overall building grossing number. And that's because this, while anticipated to be a single level jail, it will have built-in mezzanines within the housing areas. So when we remove those mezzanine level components, which would be cells, as well as some circulation areas to the cells, as well as your central control room, which would be elevated and at that mezzanine level, and several other components, you end up taking that out. What this jail footprint is essentially, this is the size of the first floor, the main level of the jail that we need to be able to plan around for being able to fit it and onto any site. And then the rest of these are really more some general assumptions. We're making some assumptions that roughly will provide about 20 parking stalls on site for public and other professional visitors to be able to come to the jail, anticipating a staff parking lot of another 20 stalls to accommodate staff and shift change. Some additional county parking potentially for other county vehicles, which would be part of maybe the inmate transport or facilities or other component. And then also on site, needing to be able to accommodate some other operational for garbage dumpsters and recycling and the like to be able to incorporate onto the site. So that brings us to kind of how much is the base minimum square footage that would be needed to be able to fit this onto the site, including parking, would be just under 100,000 square feet. But knowing once you develop that, we actually do need to be able to have some landscape buffers. We need to have some additional circulation. We have to have some setbacks, both for safety and security, but also potentially to be able to meet development codes based off of where the site is actually located at. So we incorporate some of that information. So we have some site circulation as well as some planting and other setbacks incorporated into it, which pretty much brings us to an overall site requirement of about 190,000 square feet. That equates to about 4.37 acres to be able to develop based off of this. Again, it could be slightly less than that. It could be slightly more than that, depending on the site that is actually selected, based off topography, how flat it is, if there's any other environmental elements that are on the site, if there's any additional site development requirements for enlarged setbacks or anything along those lines based off of where it's located. But this is at least a nice starting point to start evaluating this. Additionally, depending on where the site's at, there can be a possibility that more of the first floor could actually be elevated up to a mezzanine level or a second floor area, which again, that will be part of this next phase as we continue to really analyze the potential sites that have been brought forward. So that is pretty much the summary of the program. So moving on from that, let me go grab. Okay. So as I indicated, that we kind of broke the building apart into the different components. What we end up having here is really starting at the front of the building and kind of working our way to the back. So based off of the lobby, which would be really the public entry into the building, which would include, the public lobby, any non-contact and contact visiting would also be all kind of incorporated into here. So based off of the conversations, we had a weather vestibule that we'd incorporate into the front of the building. We had a lobby that would accommodate roughly 10 people coming in. We'd have video visiting alcoves where people would be able to come in to be able to visit with their loved ones that happen to be within your jail. So we incorporated a space to be able to accommodate 3 visits at a time. We also have inmate account kiosks. So essentially people would be able to come in and be able to put money onto their commissary and other accounts. And then we start really getting into the visiting. So we'd have for contact professional visits, we provided 2. And so this would be for, attorneys and private investigators, anything with DOC needing to come and talk to an inmate would all kind of occur at those locations. Then we provided 4, which is what's indicated here, 3 standard and 1 that would be ADA compliant, non-contact visiting booths. So essentially there'd be a room that someone would be able to go in onto this non-secured public side. And then there'd be a window that would be in place separating them from the in-custody inmate. On the opposite side, we provide the exact same thing that would be for on the inmate side. So that would be 3 that are standard, and then 1 more that's a ADA compliant. So essentially we'd have 2 contact visiting and 4 non-contact visiting rooms set up. We also have programmed and planned for public restrooms, janitor's closets, gun locker, and then visitor lockers, so they can lock up anything that they can't take into the jail or into the contact or non-contact visiting areas. So they'd be able to kind of keep all that outside of the facility. One question that we did have, just based off of the conversations, was with regard to fingerprint. If there needs to be anything, or if there needs to be another fingerprint location up at the front of the building, because we do have fingerprint in the back for other functions with regard to sex offender registration or any other function. And if we're fine of just having that 1 fingerprint station back at the alternatives area, which is currently where it's located, or if we need a plan for another fingerprint function up here off of the lobby.
Yeah, Bill, it's Chief. I don't remember. Do we have a separate alternative sentencing area like day reporting,
We do.
work release, and all that? Okay.
Yeah, a separate entry that's off of more of that back secured area.
Okay, yeah, that's fine. We wouldn't need a fingerprint machine up in the front.
Okay. So if someone is coming for sex offender registration, they would literally go to that portion and that alternatives.
Yeah, right now they go down to the sheriff's office, but we have court commitments that come in oftentimes that don't do any jail time. That could have their fingerprints and pictures taken back in alternatives.
Okay, that works. So that was just a clarification we want to make sure. And then then there's some court and video court components that we end up having here. We would just want to make sure that we are doing just a shared lobby. So the lobby for court and video court functions is just going to be part of your jail lobby that we covered just a second ago. If this is really operating, or would you ever have a metal detector that you'd want to have in the lobby for either supporting visiting or for court functions?
Yes, we would.
Okay. So we will have that.
It could just be a walkthrough one, you know.
Yeah. And I'll come back and kind of revisit that. If there's any additional space that would be needed here in the lobby to make sure that we have space to accommodate circulation around just a through metal detector. So we will make sure that we take care of that. So then there's with this court component and court function, we have a restroom for the attorneys to be able to use. We actually incorporate, based off of conversations, 2 offices, which are going to be bullpen configurations, essentially for 3 occupants to be able to go in, 1 for the prosecutor's office and 1 for the public defender. And so those would be incorporated. Essentially, this all would be off of the lobby. There would be an attorney workroom where either a private attorney, the public defender, or the prosecutor's office would be able to go and be able to use copiers, recycling, and anything else associated with that. And then what we end up having is the balance of this is really all the video court functions to be able to facilitate those operations. So we actually have 2 holding cells, one that's a little bit larger for roughly 10 in custody inmates, and then 2 that are smaller. There'd be more single or up to possibly 3 to 5 inmates in place. There was an open waiting area for queuing as correction staff are transporting and bringing in custodies up, that there's a place to be able to queue them, possibly before they put them into holding or as they're moving them from holding and into the video courtrooms. So we accommodated and captured that. And then what we had discussed was actually having 4 video courtrooms, 1 for Superior Court, 1 District Court, 1 for Municipal Court, and then another 4th video courtroom that would be a little bit larger in size to be able to accommodate either additional participants or to be for ADA. So in case anyone, whether it is the defendant or it happens to be one of the attorneys that happens to be there, that the room is a little bit oversized for that operations. We also have a video court office for staff to be able to kind of manage this function for video court, as well as a small storage room that would be shared for both district and superior court functions. It was discussed there wasn't and shouldn't be a need to actually have an in-custody inmate restroom. So we wanted to document that, but it is zeroed out, as you can see here. It's not being provided, as well as a discussion about an interview room not needed for video court. We do have other interview rooms elsewhere within the facility. Then getting into jail administration. This is pretty much anything that's really supporting the jail operations and staff is what this section is all about. And so let me kind of scroll back up to the top. So at the very top is really the interface between the public and the jail operations. So we had a receptionist desk, which would be acting as the full-time receptionist location. It'd be a glass enclosure directly off of the lobby for that public interaction and interface. We would have 2 warrants clerks stations that would be in workstations. We wanted to make sure that there was a conduit, essentially a way for bookings for warrants and other paperwork to be able to get back to intake and booking. So we wanted to be able to kind of capture that as a functional need. We also have a accounting and billings office, which would be an enclosed office with 2 guest chairs incorporated into it. Jail records clerks, there'd be 2 in workstations, and then there would be record storage. Currently, it was indicated that you had about 200 square feet of record storage, but most of that is going digital or is being digitized, so less square footage was needed. So we left about 120 square feet for record storage. We had the chief's office, which is a private office and can accommodate up to 4 visitors at a round table for small meetings. There was going to be 2 lieutenant's offices, a admin assistant's office, and then a classroom. So this was something that we talked a lot about, and just I don't know if that's kind of changed. There was a conversation that maybe this conference room could also be used as part of the alternatives classroom or vice versa. Wasn't sure if that's something that if you still think that might be an option or not, depending on situation.
Yeah, Bill, it's Kevin again. I don't remember. Do we have a training room somewhere?
We do, and we'll get to that. So the training room was back in the detention programs area. And so that was more for defensive tactics training and maybe some larger classroom training. And it was essentially using one of the multi-purpose classrooms that would be for programs for in your inmates to be done and oriented in a way that would then allow your staff to go back and use it at certain times for those defensive tactics and other trainings and classes.
Oh, okay. So yeah, having a conference room in the admin area is pretty important for smaller meetings. We don't need a big room, but we got 600 square feet.
Yeah, this would be able to accommodate, roughly 15 to maybe 20 participants in more of a conference room setting where there'd be a large table. Most participants are at the table, some potentially, behind and along the walls.
Yeah, that's appropriate.
Okay, so we will leave this in, and we can kind of, again, revisit this as need be. And then incorporating a kitchenette that would support both this jail administration suite as well as that conference room. Some storage room off of the conference room. And then there is a overshift room. So this would be for any officers that are having to go into court or poor weather or a host of different things. They have an opportunity to be able to have a quiet space to be able to rest as they get off a shift and then have to go directly to court or be able to go directly back onto shift. So incorporate a small space for that. incorporate a mail room, which essentially would be a series of mailboxes that would be accessible from the admin side, as well as probably from a staff circulation corridor. A storage room, a work room, which is, again, work rooms throughout this is essentially where you put your copier, you have your office supplies, any other kind of operational supplies to be able for that department. Is incorporated two staff restrooms, which would either be a male, female, or two unisex. And again, the size is the same. It'd be more just how they'd be labeled. And then a staff entry, which would be an entry directly into this area, and incorporating a weather vestibule to be able to make sure that we're thoughtful about energy compliance, and we don't have exterior door without a weather vestibule. So that was the main part of jail administration. Also, as part of this, as you kind of come down to here, is this alternative sentencing program. So this has that alternatives classroom that we just talked about. And so that essentially there would be a conference room in the jail administration and then a separate alternatives classroom to be able to support this program. This would have a sub lobby, either off of with a kind of a waiting area to be able to accommodate roughly 4 people at any one time coming in and checking in to come into the alternatives program. You'd have your program supervisory. There'd be your analysis restroom, and then a adjoining space that would be there for observations or for actual storage and testing as needed off of that space. This is where we had our fingerprint station and photo station that we talked about earlier. If you needed that all duplicated up at the front of the building, or if it'd be just here at this alternatives area. So we have that accommodated. We also have some additional storage for monitoring equipment, your ankle bracelets, as well as additional UA supplies, and then this alternatives classroom. Excuse me. And then getting into staff support. So this would be, again, anything with regard to staff. So this is your locker rooms, showers. We, per the state, we need to provide a lactation room, which is just an enclosed room. Typically, we provide a sink and under-counter refrigerator. Again, this only has to be accessible and provided to staff. We have a transportation staff office. And this was a question, again, that we had. We weren't sure if this space was really needed in addition to our corrections staff office, which we have here in the line below, or if it would be able to be combined and included. The corrections staff office is going to have about 3 report writing areas, which are going to have computer terminals, as well as all the kind of the security cameras for the campus are going to be displayed on a large monitor, so staff would be able to kind of be aware of what's going on throughout the facility while they're within this report writing area. So, Kevin, another question for you. Does transportation staff office need to be separate from the correction staff office?
I'm not sure, Bill. Let me think about that one. I'd
Okay.
like to see the floor plan to better visualize it, I guess.
Okay, we'll just carry this in, and then we can
Yeah.
kind of incorporate it in. And once we kind of work through, again, like floor plans and concepts, if it ends up being, that's fine, we don't need it, we can always remove it, and then we'll just update the program to align with where the conceptual plan is at.
Okay.
But it's just something that, we weren't quite sure how you visualize that operating, so we wanted a clarification. So that's fine right now.
Is that, Bill, one more question there. Is that transport office in a separate area from the correction staff office at this juncture? Like in the, I suspect there's going to be some kind of corridor to get to the courts or whatever. And I would assume that office would be associated with that area.
Probably. And again, the question becomes, is it closer to video court? Is it closer back towards housing? Is it closer towards really the vehicle sally port?
Yeah.
It can be done any way. A lot of times we've done them where we actually do have a correction staff office off of the main inmate circulation way. So it's kind of central to pretty much the hub of the jail. Which then correction staff office could be also in a similar location, since again they're going to be involved with probably moving in custodies around the facility and then outside the facility as well.
Right. Okay.
All right. And then we had classification deputies, which again was going to be done as a bullpen configuration. So it's going to be a large office with multiple workstations within it. And then one office for your classification officers, which it also would be in a bullpen configuration, but only needing to accommodate 2 stations versus the 4 with regard to classification deputies. Then this is where we have, again, one of the interview rooms, which would be for classification screenings. And then we have a staff break room / cafeteria area. There's a lot of conversations about proximity to the food service program. And so I think that's going to be kind of just working through conceptual design when we get to that point about where this ultimately gets located. But pretty much capturing it to be able to accommodate, seating for about 20, as well as obviously refrigerators and sinks and storage to be able to support your correctional staff using this space. We also had an armory incorporated. This would be located off the secured sally port. And the armory would be controlled from central control, which again is just a note for us on how ultimately it would work for access. So that's pretty much covers all of jail administration. Then we went in and this is broken actually into 3 components. We have intake, we have booking, and we have release. Looks like we lost a lot of participants just now, so.
I wonder if that's the internet issue that
I'm assuming so.
Commissioner was explaining to me.
Yes, it looks like the county went down, but they're coming back up right now.
Yeah, it looks like it. So we'll just take a minute, let everybody get back. Is it really windy there? Might be?
No.
Huh. Let's see. It looks like most everyone is back again. So we'll kind of pick that up from where
Hold on
we're
one
left.
second. Kevin, Commissioner Schutte, Under Sheriff Adams, could you please let us know that you're hearing us now? Not yet. Sharon, can you hear us? No, guys, we're gonna have to wait for.
Go ahead.
There we go. There's Sharon.
We're back.
Back.
There's Kevin. Okay. Under Sheriff Adams, are you available? So it looks like the jail is still waiting to come up.
Okay.
Chief Hanson, are you up yet?
Yeah, I'm back.
Okay. Frank's in a different location, so he should be fine. So Under Sheriff Adams and Sheriff Salisbury, are you back?
We're on. Yep, we can hear you.
Okay, guys, go ahead.
All right, we'll definitely kind of keep an eye on things, and if things happen to drop off again. So again, intake and release is really broken into 3 different components: intake, booking, and release. And all of this is really centralized in around this vehicle sally port. So what we have is a 9,000 square foot open air sally port that's anticipated based off of the conversation. And as you can see, there's no square footage accounted here in the net square footage based off of, again, what I talked about at the beginning of this meeting. This would be fenced. It would be partially covered with a roof, again, for making sure that those transports and that those transitions of in custodies is out of the weather. We're anticipating needing to accommodate DOC buses as well as multiple vehicles at any one time. So again, that's how the size of this space was really was planned. Also for vehicle circulation and turning radiuses, needing to be able to accommodate first responders and an ambulance coming if there needs to be a transport due to a medical issue. So again, that's kind of how the size of the sally port was developed. And then what we end up having for intake, we have a receiving area. So this would be pre-booking and kind of a work counter for the arresting officer to be able to have as they kind of transport and with a chain of custody. We have a report writing room incorporated, which would just be a small room with 1 or 2 computer carrels for the arresting officer to be able to finish documentation and not have to do all that in their vehicle. We talked about if there's a need for a interview room. It was discussed that we probably do not. Same with a breathalyzer room was indicate it was not required. So those 2 spaces, we want to just confirm that is still the case. You don't need a BAC room or an interview room here off of the booking area.
Sheriff, you okay with that?
I would love to answer for him, however, he stepped out.
How about you, Under Sheriff?
What's that?
So what's your answer to that? Are you okay with that?
Sure.
Not required, Bill.
All right,
I do have another question before I get too much farther.
you bet.
The intake area, we have a body scanner that takes up quite a bit of real estate. So
That's
is that
why here in this receiving area, that's why it's oversized, is to be able to accommodate that. And the body scanner plus it'd be kind of this handoff, kind of counter and interaction. So again, that would be all pre-booking, pre-screening, and essentially from this point on, that is now that individual is now in your custody. Anything before this would be part of the arresting officer. So we want to make sure that, you can get them bring them in, be able to do a pat down, be able to do your body scanning, and then transition them in and through the booking process. You'll see that what we don't have in here is an open booking area. And so based off of at least what our conversations were, is that you really didn't see a whole lot of use to that open booking area where people would just kind of sit out in the open, that you're going to be processing and really moving them through. Essentially, they'd come in and either go directly into the booking process or putting them into one of the holding rooms as your booking officers become available, and then you start processing them through. Is that still how you anticipate booking to operate? Saw everything kind of flash. Wasn't sure. Kevin, or anyone if they're still able to hear? Chief Hansen? Okay, I saw it. We saw everything flicker and people moving around on the screen, so we assumed that it might have happened. We'll just kind of wait. Yep, they're going down, and we'll wait for them to come back up.
So they're going to be coming back up as we do this. We may have to, because of this issue, we may have to find a way to shorten up some of this so we can get done while you still have them on there.
Sure.
Obviously, this is not an issue that's going to go away. So as we bring them back in, please consider that so we can go to wrap it up. Thank you.
I would like to, when they get back up, want to go over housing, and we can do that. Then we can jump forward and kind of talk about some of the legislative items. And then if we need back, we can kind of come back and talk a little bit more about this, the program.
Okay. So we're an hour into it now, and I know that the other two commissioners have an appointment they have to get to for another meeting, shortly. So keep that in mind as well.
Okay.
So with that being said, one of the things I'm going to want to hear is the costs again. The others are still not on. I'll just let you know my own personal opinion. I think we're far from anything that I think is even doable again, just like at the district court level. It got way out of control, and I think that's what's happening here. I'm just one commissioner with one opinion. But if we can't afford to do it, then it doesn't get done. And I don't know how you're going to bring the price tag that you're looking at to the people. So I'm just telling you my 2 cents is trying to fill up some airtime, but at least you'll know where this commissioner stands, and you're welcome to call the others.
You bet. You indicate that some of the commissioners had to leave shortly. Again, we were kind of developing this schedule based and the meeting agenda around everyone's availability until 4.
Yeah, that's their next meeting is at 4.
Okay.
So just so you know.
Shouldn't see this as being a problem.
Okay. They're still not back though.
No.
I'm going to make a phone call down there and see what we have. So none of them are coming up. Frank, in the meantime, do you have any questions or anything? You should still be on, right?
Yes, and at this point, no. I'll have some questions when we get to the mitigating issues.
Mhm.
If we do. So if they can't get back on, I'm not a big enough audience. Sorry, guys. Now, Bill, I want you to know, if you ever want to have a direct conversation, you're more than welcome to call and talk to me. Like I said, I'm one person, one commissioner, but I know what I can and what I can't. And, so far at this point, you and I have never had that discussion. I know I brought it up at the other meetings, though, when we've met.
Yep. If they're able to get back up.
There's a possibility they may not. Although I know you're busy, we may have to reschedule if they can't. Oh, here they come. Here's one. One is not a lot, but
Has this been going on all day or all week?
I haven't seen it, but obviously something is happening. But you know what could happen is I can try and get a hold of them, see if I can get them up to come on their phones. Give me 1 minute here. Well, that's interesting.
Back.
Okay. Hey, just so you know, guys, let's see how many we got. We got all of them? No?
Nope.
Sorry, I didn't mean to yell, but we were talking about, we were telling each other that it's back.
Yeah, well, Sharon, one of the things that we can do is if it falls off, we can contact through the telephones. That's not going to be the same thing as going through the county. If you were to use
Right.
your phone to chime in, you won't be dropped off.
Yeah, we won't be able to see the screen, but
No.
we could do that.
Yep. Like I said, if we get dropped off again.
Sounds like a plan.
Under Sheriff, I see you back on. Can you hear us now?
Yeah, I can hear you. Apparently we're having problems with our network.
Yeah, it's the whole county down there. Just to let you know, if you do run into a problem, you want to continue the conversation, you won't be able to see things as Commissioner Trask mentioned, but I want to remind you, you could just use your phone.
Yeah.
And call in. At least you won't be dropped to be off of the county's system.
Yep, right on.
Chief Hansen, can you hear us?
Yep, I'm back.
Okay. We just, again, we wanted to be thoughtful of everybody's time and also with the connectivity issues that are kind of going on. We're going to jump forward and talk a little bit about.
Hold on 1 minute. I still do not see Commissioner Schutte.
Oh, yeah, speak of the devil. There he is.
And now I see Commissioner Schutte.
Perfect.
Commissioner Schutte, can you hear us?
I can. Yep.
Okay.
Okay, please continue.
So we're going to move forward and talk housing, just in case everybody drops off. We would definitely want to talk about that. Then we're going to talk about some of these legislative questions that were brought up. And then if everyone is able to continue to stay connected, then we'll go back and kind of hit on and cover some of these other aspects of the program. But we definitely wanted to talk a little bit on housing. So what we end up having here, this is our inmate programs and our alternative housing. So we wanted to talk a little bit about that. So within this, the program, we have a programs workroom, which again would just be material storage and copier or printer associated with that. There'd be a staff restroom because we need to kind of plan that this might be slightly removed. And staff might be here for a prolonged period of time. Then this is where we started really talking about using this space also to be able to support some of these training program for staff. So we have a defensive tactics storage room. And so this would be off of a large multi-purpose room. So you'd be able to store your mats and other training equipment. Then this is where we'd have this large multi-purpose room, which would be able to be used for a classroom for programs for your in-custody inmates, but also it's sized to be able to accommodate your defensive tactics mats and that program. So is a kind of a shared resource and shared use function is how this would be sized. And then we have a medium-sized multi-purpose classroom that would be more your technology classroom. It'd be wired up for 12 inmate computers and would be able to be set up for 10 to 13 person kind of classroom function within that space. Back here, we also would incorporate two smaller, more one-on-one meeting rooms that could be used as an interview room or one-on-one kind of counseling and program space. And so we incorporated that into this space, some just general storage for programs. We have your library storage, inmate restroom, because again, people are going to be here for a duration of time. And then we talked about the dog therapy program. So there was 5 dog kennels, treatment and procedure kind of bath area for the animals, and then a dog run that would be incorporated into this program space. So that's essentially the programs area that would be there. And then off of that or in proximity to that would be this alternatives housing. These are all dormitories. So essentially the day room and the sleeping area is all open. That's the configuration of this housing area. So we have our work release, work crew. So essentially everybody that is leaving the campus is going to be all located together. So again, this is to help make sure that there's nothing being brought into your facility, and an opportunity for work crew to interact with your inmate workers. So we'd have a male dormitory and a female dormitory. The male dormitory would accommodate up to 18 work release and work crew, and then female dormitory would accommodate 6. Then we have a screening area and room. So essentially you'd be able to do your pat downs, or if you need, and have another magnetometer here for screening of anyone coming back into the facility, would be through that space. And then we have our inmate workers. So these would be the ones that would be supporting you in your janitorial services, your food service, your laundry. And so we have them split between a male dormitory, which would accommodate 16, and a female dormitory, which accommodates 6. So that's how we're able to get to that 46 folks that would be in this alternative housing program. And then with your general population, general housing, we kind of talked through some different classification levels and really the size that they have or you'd like to be able to have for that. And that's what's indicated here on the right-hand side in the notes. So this is the target. So that's what we had talked about on the classification that you'd like to have within each of those units. And then this is the actual total that we get based off of the geometry and function within the units. But above is the control room. So there'd be a staff restroom for more correctional staff. There'd be a holding cell. You'd be your housing sergeants. So this might be in close proximity to some of your correctional staff, that correctional office that we talked about earlier, or your transport office, a storage room, and then your crisis response team and their equipment would be located in a separate room. We'd have a Sally vestibule accessing the control room, and then your actual elevated control room that would be incorporated into it. And there would be a restroom that would be associated with that control room. Then that control room would overlook housing. And then within housing, knowing that your existing facility has 10 different housing units, this plan between the work release and the inmate worker program dormitories, as well as these, we're able to provide 12 different units. So there you can have a broad variety of different classifications that you can accommodate within this facility. So going from the top to the bottom, we have your minimum custody male. The target was 36. With this kind of configuration in quad cells, you'd have 32 beds within that unit. Then you'd have a medium male that the target was 24. With double cells, we'd have 24 within that unit. So we hit the target right on. Then there's a max male that was wanted in double cells. Again, we'd have, the target was 24. We were able to provide 24 in this configuration. Why they're listed twice is that this would be the first floor, the main level. This would be the mezzanine level. So we're, again, accommodating a stacked day room and stacked cells off of those day rooms. Then we get into kind of our even higher level of custody. So we have a protective custody. There is wanting a target of 12 in single cells. We're able to hit the target right on of 12. Then we have a disciplinary male. Again, in single cells, the goal was 12, or the target was 12. We were able to provide 12 in this configuration. And then there's a mental health unit that would be needed for your male population. The target was 32. This would be in a series of single cells on one level and double cells. So essentially what they're called buddy bunks for mental health on the other level. So that would actually be able to accommodate a total of 36 inmates within that unit. So we overshoot that slightly. So again, due to geometry and layout. And then on the female population, this is where things get a little bit more complicated because we're dealing with smaller populations. What we're suggesting with this configuration would combining your minimum level and your medium level custodies, and they would be in double bunks or double cells in still a mezzanine configuration. So the target was to be able to have 12 minimum and 8 medium for a total of 20. With this configuration, we're providing 24 beds within this unit. And then going to your higher level custody for your female population, your maximum security and your protective custody, incorporating them into a shared unit where we'd have single cells on one level and double cells on the other for the two classification types. The goal was to have between the two of them to have 8 and 8, total of 16. With this configuration, you'd have 18 beds. And then finally, a mental health unit, which would all be, sorry, this should have been labeled, which I'll correct that. With the mental health in single cells, the goal was to be able to have 8. We'd be providing 12 as part of this configuration. And then there'd be your outdoor rec, your exercise component. So we'd have one large, your general population normal access point to an exercise area of 1,200 square feet. And then there is a need to be able to have some smaller outdoor rec areas for your max custody, your disciplinary, your protected classifications. So we were providing 4 outdoor rec areas for those. There'd also be a sally port associated with kind of connecting housing and the outdoor rec to the rest of the jail as just that interaction. So we were accommodating that. Again, this is with this configuration, your general population, you'd have 10 units. So actually I did misspeak. We're actually up to 14 different units. So we have 4 over in the alternatives and then 10 here for a total of 14 different classification units within the jail. So that kind of gets us kind of through housing. We wanted to kind of be able to go back to, sorry. There we go. We wanted to come back though, and before we kind of lose everybody possibly with connectivity issues, we did want to talk a little bit more about some of these other impacts of some legislative elements that might be, the question was posed, how might these actually affect the overall planning of your jail and your jail facility. So with that, I'll turn that over to my peer here, Sherry O'Brien, and she'll be able to kind of walk you through some of that.
Thanks, Bill, and good afternoon, everybody. I'm going to keep it, in the interest of time, I'll keep it really high level, and then if there's questions, we can dial into that more. So the first one that Bill has on that list there is the Blake decision, and as you probably know, this is a recent ruling by the Washington Supreme Court, the state versus Shannon Blake, in which the state essentially found that the law criminalizing possession of controlled substances, whether knowingly or unknowingly, was considered unconstitutional. So essentially a simple drug possession is no longer illegal under the state law. Other statutes that do criminalize substance abuse disorders or possession of drug paraphernalia do still stand. So this is a simple drug possession. The anticipated impacts of this is the invalidation of the simple drug possession convictions for about 100 incarcerated individuals. That's up to 7,000 individuals sentenced to community supervision, but 1,000 incarcerated in the state currently at this time, and a potential resentencing of a nearly 2,600 individuals that are incarcerated. Questions, comments, thoughts? Bill, I think did you have the numbers for?
Yeah, I was trying to kind of start that up and kind of open that up. Essentially, though, based off of the work that Karen did during our kind of population projections and analysis, you actually had a very low amount of individuals within your jail that actually had drug possession as their sole charge. So in the reality of this ruling and change, it's probably not going to really change much about population projections or amount of need and space needs within your facility. Trying to kind of get down to those classes.
We had a couple people unmute. Did you have questions, comments, things to add on that?
Yes, Chief Hansen, I was just going to comment that one of the reasons that our population in the last 3, 4, or 5 years is lacking in those minor drug offense charges being incarcerated is because of the booking restrictions.
Okay.
Yep.
I think that's impacted that.
Okay. So, but with this new ruling, again, they wouldn't, even if you're booking restrictions because you had additional capacity coming back, you wouldn't be taking the simple possession charges into your facility.
Correct. But they're more than likely going to be in the alternative sentencing area, I hope. That's the end game.
Yep. Which we already planned based off the conversations that we had, that the alternatives sentencing area is larger than your current area. So it was anticipated that program was going to grow. Okay.
Was there another comment there? I thought maybe somebody was speaking up.
Yeah, I did have a question as a follow-up. So in the analysis to come up with the 240, how far back did your survey go to?
We were looking back 5 years. So at the time was the full data was 2018 through 2013 because we were doing that analysis in 2019. So we only had partial year data to be able to work from. So the projections and the demographic analysis was going all the way back through 2013.
So Chief Hansen's comment then that over the last 5 years, we've technically been missing those inmates because of our booking restrictions doesn't have an impact on your number because we've been missing them for the last 5 years.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think you've had booking restrictions in place a lot longer than 5 years.
Since 2016.
Okay, so this data then kind of straddles that.
Yeah.
Yeah, in reality, when you kind of look at them, there wasn't a huge amount of either drop off or peaks or really transitions, as you remember from the that data. So there was some, ups and downs, but nothing severely changing.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Okay. The next item on the list was Senate Bill, or it's actually, Senate Bill 5248, which is proposed for 2021. And this bill is looking to establish a joint legislative task force to establish jail standards. And they've identified a need to standardize rights and responsibilities, and that there is a need for a statewide regulatory body that has oversight powers. And they would be looking to provide oversight, transparency, consistency, inspection mechanisms to improve health, safety, and living conditions for those in jails throughout the state. Some of the impacts of this. So obviously that task force, this is the bill to make the task force. So once the task force is made, they will be going through a list of things that they are looking at to help establish those standards, and then how those standards would be implemented. But some of the things that bill does highlight at this time, it's very much oriented towards programs, but it's looking to improve access to needed treatment for mental health and substance abuse, as well as those with co-occurring disorders. So it's been established that about 58% of incarcerated individuals have mental health, diagnosed mental health issues, and 61% with substance use disorders, 41% with co-occurring disorders. So some of the things that they're looking to do with this bill is looking at ways to promote family and community connection and economic stability. So a lot of the program pieces that Bill was presenting would be reflected for that. So looking at more visitation, as well as economic stability, potentially programs and education to help teach those kinds of life skill sets. Looking to improve health and well-being, including mental health. So when we're looking at that, the health part of the program, that would need to be able to be supporting whatever the new standards would be coming out with. They're also looking at reviewing the square footage of living space requirements per individual. I think that, Bill, right now we're using ACA, is that correct? So that's probably a pretty safe bet. I'd be surprised if the state of Washington has more stringent than the ACA, but they will be looking at that, as well as overall jail capacity and the average daily population for all facilities over the past 5 years. Looking at medical and dental services, mental health services, treatment and programming options, as well as potential accreditation status. Other things that won't affect us that you might want to be aware of is looking at the use of force incidents over the past 5 years, in custody deaths, and the cause of deaths. They're also looking at food quality and quantity, the use of solitary confinement, and then recreational activities and programs associated with that. When we get further into design, also looking at access to telecommunications, electronic media, and commissary services. So that's very kind of programs approach, or programs impact to that. The group, once formed, will work to collect data and make recommendations about how to restore statewide regulatory authority for jail standards throughout the state. They're also looking at other states for case studies for funding those programs to figure out how other folks are doing it.
Yep. And so a lot, as you can kind of hear, the program and the needs analysis has already addressed probably a lot of that. Again, who knows what the task force ultimately is going to require or expect, but with already having within your health and your clinic providing those type of services, as discussed with regard to kind of dental and health services, also having a behavioral health unit for both your male and female populations, and a fairly extensive and robust programs area to be able to accommodate a very wide range of skills development and behavioral health and wellness programs, as well as GED and other programs along those lines. But most likely, this program already is going to be in line with that. I think the bigger issue would be if they end up evaluating and trying to compare what these new jail standards are and then comparing them to your existing facility. That's where you probably have a much larger disparity of compliance, most likely. But again, that's crystal ball. We have no idea what exactly is going to come of those. As Sherry indicated, right now we're just following ACA standards with regards to areas of spaces, size of cells, all the like, access to daylight, those type of functions, and then also just following best practices with regard to correctional environments.
Questions, comments, clarifications, additions?
So your recommendation at this time is that your current configuration, obviously not knowing what's in a crystal ball, will be close to what the new standards are going to come out with?
Like you said, we have no idea what they're working to develop that task force, but looking at what we have from a programs perspective, it is best practice plus. So we're offering a lot of mental health, and this is what we've seen counties doing over the past several years, is going more in this direction of being able to offer those services. And so, you know, without our crystal ball, we believe that what we have in place supports best practice, and what this commission would probably come up with as recommendations, that what we have in place would support those needs.
Mm-hmm. And then looking back into your crystal ball for a moment, what's a timeline you might think something like this might come back to the county? 2 years, 5 years, 12 months?
Just crystal ball. This is the state. They are just forming a task force right now. I would bet, just based off of the speed that the state works, that you're probably looking at more like 2022 before a task force is actually formed. And then I bet that they would be allowed at least a year, if not more, to evaluate, report out, and then develop standards. So if I had to look in my crystal ball and I had to give you a timeline, I would say you're 3 to 5 years before there would be published standards that would be coming out from this task force.
Perfect, thank you.
Hey, Frank, Chief again. I can't imagine that the committee that the legislature puts together would establish unreasonable standards that would be too far out of line with existing standards, such as the American Correctional Association or National Correctional Healthcare standards, or even the Justice Institute standards, you know, which aren't unreasonable, and that I don't think it's going to be too far out of line from that, is what I'm trying to say. And I don't think it's going to be unachievable.
And what we're defining here, Bill, Sherry, is ACA plus those standards and above. Correct?
Well, correct. Again, I wouldn't say that we are going well above, but again, as far ACA typically is more focused on operations and less about physical environment, but they do have some physical environment and space requirements. We are 100% following those requirements with regard to ACA for that compliance. But what we are, I guess, in going above and beyond is what's not necessarily defined is how many program spaces do you end up using, and how are you using them? What we anticipate based off our conversations with the chief is that obviously there's going to be dedicated program spaces like these classrooms to be able to provide program services to the inmates. But also it's anticipated that the day rooms is another opportunity to provide program functions within. So in the reality of it, you are able to, depending on, again, how you want to be able to configure that and operate that, is that you do have multiple spaces to be able to provide that. Also, just outdoor rec, there's requirements that you have to be able to comply to be able to provide minimum numbers of hours for all inmates to be able to have access to outdoor rec over a period of time. The amount of outdoor rec spaces that we have allows for a very reasonable scheduling to be able to have a full capacity jail having access to outdoor rec to be able to meet those needs. And within the program, there's discussions about being able to target a certain amount of hours based off of Chief Hansen and the staff's kind of directions and goals for that. So I'd say we are, when I say we are plus, it would be because we are just kind of in line with best practices of what we've actually seen throughout the country, especially here in the Western states with regard to approach to correctional facilities design and operations. But still, they're well in line with the interpretations of ACA and correctional institutions and other industry standards and recommendations.
Again,
But I would, as just a final statement would be, this is not, the program is not planning for a cutting edge facility, but a relevant modern jail.
yep, and thanks for looking in the crystal ball.
As best we can.
Do you have staffing levels associated with this design based on a growing level of inmate population?
We do not, but we will. That is part of the scope of work that we have to do. First, we have to get through a program and understand spaces and departments and units and everything else. Then from that, we can actually develop a staffing plan. So that would be part of this next level of analysis and design as we were going through site selection and evaluation to kind of really work through that staffing plan. We really need to be able to have a conceptual plan to really be able to look at it and start saying, okay, how is this going to be operated? What are the staffing locations? Are they 24/7? Are they typical business hour stations? What's the overlap that we're going to do? So we really have to kind of get the design further along before we can go back in and really determine what the staffing plan really looks like. Because as you can tell with your facility, there's some, because of how it happens to be configured, there might be a requirement for some additional staffing positions that if it was configured differently, you wouldn't necessarily need. And that'd be true of a new facility as well.
Thank you.
So, Bill, as I discussed earlier, we will have another meeting that we have to attend soon. What do you think we need to move on to next to make sure we get everything that's necessary into this meeting?
Wanted to definitely talk about the juvenile designation and charges, since that has changed and that might actually have an effect on some of the analysis that's already been done.
Please do.
Okay, so the legislature that has passed over the past 2 years, you're probably all familiar with Senate Bill 6160, which was signed last March, about a year ago, right when we kind of deconvened for a little while. And that revised the conditions under which a person is subject to an adult sentencing and allows them to stay in the juvenile justice system. So that essentially the level of crime that they've committed was raised to a higher level of crime that allows them to still be sentenced under juvenile jurisdiction, removing them from the adult system. And the other one, which is the Senate House Bill 1646, which was signed 2 years ago in May 2019, extended the age of youth in the juvenile system from 21 to 25. So that moves those youth from the adult system to the juvenile system. Those are the two pieces that have fully past legislation and are currently being implemented. With COVID, some of those moves from the adult system to the juvenile system have not happened. There is a backlog on that because of not wanting to do transfers right now. And we anticipate that those transfers will start to kick in a little bit more this summer when we can get more of the population vaccinated, and we'll see some of those be realized to a greater extent than they have been.
You know, as we become more and more proficient at our alternative sentencing with our juvenile, we have less and less of a population. With that being said, we have an extremely high amount of money we have to spend for that small population. And we've had discussions as a commission about finding ways to have connections between the different types of, adult and juvenile, but there's restrictions by law, of course. Could I ask that in the future, you look at some of those possibilities of combinations? We're looking at a lot of money that's sitting out there that could go towards this pocket if we can find a way to combine legally.
Yeah, that's the big issue is obviously space standards and program functions are different between adult and juvenile, but also, as you indicated, Commissioner, having to keep sight and sound separation between your entire adult population as well from your juvenile population. So that becomes really difficult to incorporate into a single facility to be able to kind of combine that from an efficiency standpoint. And still be able to keep total sight and sound separation between your adult population and your juvenile population. So that is kind of the biggest kind of issue. A lot of jurisdictions, they have some shared operations and functions, like maybe laundry and food service is all done at the adult facility and then transported to be able to support the juvenile facility. But yeah. It's a difficult issue to try to overcome.
Well, we don't even have that, just to give you an idea. There's times we have one person, but still expending the money as though we had all the large amount. So I think we're maybe just looking for whatever options that still stay within that law, but just trying to look at ways to do it. But again, we're talking on the larger end, maybe 5 or 7.
Commissioner, I've got some ideas on that if you want to talk offline at some point.
I would look forward to it. Thank you, Chief.
Yep. And Bill, on that note, I would suspect that there would be a way to accommodate some short-term juvenile housing, like 24 hours in this plan.
Quite possibly. Again, I think that's the key is really that keeping that separation and ensuring that there is no opportunity for sight and sound to occur. Again, I'm not saying that anything is not possible, but it definitely makes things a little bit tricky.
Okay.
There is a whole slew of proposed bills on the table as well, many of them having more of an operational than a facility impact, but I'll review them briefly. House Bill 1413 proposes to eliminate the use of prior juvenile felony convictions in calculating adult sentences, and this will allow for resentencing. So again, it's the movement of youth that are currently in the adult system moving back into the juvenile system. Senate Bill 5164 is similar to the adult one. It's the removing of the second-degree robbery from the 3 strikes penalty. So that is both the same for adults and youth, and that is retroactive as well. House Bill 1344 proposes to increase the age of a sentence review from under 18 to up to 25 years old. Senate Bill 5120 seeks to codify youthfulness as a factor in sentencing, so in making the court take into consideration mitigating factors of youth and giving the court full discretion to depart from the mandatory sentencing enhancements, mandatory minimums, and standard age range, essentially allowing them to impose a lesser sentence than the mandatory minimum. So the effect of this would probably be reduced length of stays would be the result. Senate Bill 5285 expands earned release time. So essentially, it expands the people that are eligible to have an early release based on good behavior and good performance. That before didn't allow folks with any crimes with a deadly weapon that occurred with a deadly weapon, serious offense, or sexual offense were not eligible for earned release, and they are now. So again, all this will do is do more to reduce the potential average length of stay. Operational only, Senate Bill 5339 allows full expungement of juvenile records. And then this is kind of the one that might have the most impact. I know it's having the most impact and making the most at the state level, which is the CTS, or Community Transition Services, which is another term, and the proper term, that is the language the state is using. So we will use that language, Community Transition Services, to define this. What this is an equivalent of something like home monitoring. So it's moving youth out of incarcerated from the jails, from that into home community care. So again, it's reducing the number of youth that are going to be in the system and putting them back in their home communities, or alternative sentencing, but not alternative sentencing like work release, alternative sentencing like home.
Any questions on any of those?
And what impact do you think that's going to have on the overall numbers for Mason County?
I think when you take all these together, as far as numbers go, I'll look to Bill, but the big takeaway is it's going to be potentially reducing the youth that are actually in the system by reducing their sentences. So as Chief Hansen was saying, we may need more for 24-hour stays, but at that point, you're probably going to kick more of them back out into the community, and their overall length of stays will be reduced, making your whole capacity need reduced. And I think it's probably bigger impact at the state level, because those average lengths of stays are obviously much, much longer than at the county level.
Do we have that type of demographic to be able to dig in?
We do, and so I was just kind of pulling up the analysis that we did. Again, this was kind of a snapshot in time, which is the only way to kind of do it without a very exhaustive analysis of looking at day to day. But the snapshot in time was on December 4th, 2019. So relevant from a timing standpoint is that in that 20 to 24 age bracket, you had 13% of your entire in custody population fit within that age bracket. So, and still, I would guess that not 100% of that population would comply with any of these sentencing requirements, but there might be a portion. So if you end up even looking at, say, 75% of that population would be somehow affected by any of these, either from the juvenile designation or from the sentencing guidelines, that would have ultimately effect of about 9 in custody individuals being removed from your facility. So in the big picture of things, that's kind of about the level of magnitude that we would kind of expect from most of these. Like I said, most of the what was in your jail, which kind of, again, we used for a lot of your population projections with regards to simple possession of drug charges, they're not there. As Chief Hansen indicated, they were already on some other form of alternative sentencing or program, so they were not in the jail as it was. And the hope would be, as things kind of open back up, to be able to bring more of those higher risk folks back in that were actually out on some other form of alternative program once those
And that is the one piece I know we skipped it, but the one piece I wanted to highlight, and I don't have a bill number to go with it, but for adult sentencing guideline changes, the state is proposing legislature that will actually move more drug offenders into alternative sentencing. And by that, they mean chemical dependency treatment and community supervision. So more folks that would not be incarcerated in a jail setting, but in their home community without, I'm assuming, what would be considered outpatient drug treatment.
Right.
And then again, in that area, do we have any demographical analysis that can kind of give us an indication of what that might be?
Well, I can grab, here's the status and classification that we end up having. Again, this was another snapshot in time analysis that we did. So on December the 4th, and this was on January the 9th of 2020. As you can see, most of them, there's not a lot of possession of controlled substances. This was 5 out of 99 as of January 9th, 2020. And then again, you had most were felony conviction or felony classifications were 65% of your population. So as far as getting to that more granular level, no, we don't have that. And again, it's your population and the demographics change every day. So no matter what we kind of look at on any given day, it's probably going to change a week later. But as Chief Hansen indicated already, there was, due to booking restrictions, there was probably people within your community that, due to their risk profile, as well as due to their sentencing or their offense, that probably should have been in jail versus being on one of the other alternative programs.
Mhm.
So that would have, I think that at least at the granular level, they're going to be offsetting each other as you have capacity to actually book and hold based off of your true risk profile.
Bill, we're going to need to wrap up. Can you cover what's absolutely necessary here at the end?
That's pretty much it. Again, we'll have a separate meeting with Chief Hansen and the sheriff and undersheriff and the staff to kind of review this program. We're going to send it out to you so you have the hard copy as well as the meeting minutes from February the 20th to be able to start reviewing. And we'll schedule a meeting coming up to be able to meet and review so we can actually refine the program a little bit more. And then the next step is really going to be really reviewing those sites and analyzing how the program really fits and deploys on the sites and the viability of the different sites. So those are really the next steps. We have already done initial reviews of the areas, the access, the development requirements of those sites, which we can share at a later date or at kind of another kind of future meeting. But until we can really get through that, besides, this is pretty much what we've been charged with is what is the need with regard to beds based off demographics and future projections. And then this is the need for space to be able to accommodate those population projections and needs. And that's kind of what we're tasked with at this point. As far as what is this facility going to cost, we really don't have an idea until we can understand what does that mean and how it would be developed onto an individual site. Again, part of what our analysis is going to be is putting this program onto your existing site as well. That's one of the sites that we're evaluating. So obviously that might have an effect on overall solution as well as cost, but we don't know. We got to get through that
All right.
stuff.
Is there anything from the body that's absolutely necessary before we adjourn? Then hearing none, Kevin or Sharon, I would entertain a motion because this is a special meeting to adjourn, please.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Hearing no objection, we are adjourned. Thank you so very much for joining us, and we'll get together again soon.
Sounds
Thanks,
good.
Bill. Thanks, team.
Thank
Good to see
you.
you guys again.
Guys.
Good to see you. Take care.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.